You are listening to From Embers, a weekly show on CFRC 101.9 FM about anarchist and anti-authoritarian ideas and practice. We are broadcasting from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples on land that has come to be called Kingston, Ontario, Canada, because of the thievery and brutality of the Canadian state and its empire-loving parents. From Embers is about fires, some real and some metaphorical. Fires started generations ago and tended to over the years. Little sparks all across this territory that we hope will grow, spread, and engulf the thieving state called Canada and the capitalist system that has plagued this land since the fur trade.
In today's episode of From Embers, we'll be talking about prison organizing in Canada. A nationwide prison strike has just kicked off in the U.S. From August 21st to September 9th, prison rebels have declared a nationwide strike in response to the riot in Lee Correctional Institution, which is a maximum security prison in South Carolina. 7 people lost their lives when prison officials turned their backs on a riot they provoked. Prisoners are demanding humane living conditions, access to rehabilitation, sentencing reform, and the end of modern-day slavery. In Burnside Jail in Nova Scotia, prisoners have joined in with their own protest and have issued their own set of demands, as well as a call for collective actions and support from people outside. In this episode, I talked to an outside organizer in Halifax about the solidarity protest in Burnside Jail, and we'll also hear a conversation later about experiences organizing in prison and Prisoner Justice Day. Here's what Burnside prisoners have to say in their own words. We, the prisoners of Burnside, have united to fight for change. We are unified across the population in nonviolent, peaceful protest. We are calling for support from the outside in solidarity with us. We believe that it is only through collective action that change will be made. We recognize that the staff in the jail are workers who are also facing injustice. We are asking for a more productive, rehabilitative environment that supports the well-being of everyone in the system. These policy changes will also benefit the workers in the jail. Our voices should be considered in the programming and policies for this jail. The changes we are demanding to our conditions are reasonable and must happen to support our human rights. The organizers of this protest assert that we are being warehoused as inmates, not treated as human beings. We have tried through other means, including complaint, conversation, negotiation, petitions, and other official and non-official means to improve our conditions. We now call upon our supporters outside these walls to stand with us in protesting our treatment. We join in this protest in solidarity with our brothers in prison in the United States who are calling for a prison strike from August 21st to September 9th. We support the demands of our comrades in the United States, and we join their call for justice. Our demands in Nova Scotia are different, and we note that they are comparatively more modest. We are part of an international call for justice, and we recognize the roots of this struggle in a common history of struggle and liberation. We are not the first, and we will not be the last. We recognize that the injustices we face in prison are rooted in colonialism, racism, and capitalism. August is a month rich with the history of Black struggle in the Americas. In 1619, the first ship carrying forcibly enslaved Africans arrived in Jamestown, Virginia. More than 200 years ago, the first successful slave revolt created the first independent Black nation, Haiti. In the early 19th century, Gabriel Prosser and Nat Turner launched their rebellions, and in 1850, after the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act, Harriet Tubman began an underground railroad to Canada. A century later, the March on Washington, the Watts Uprising, and the police bombing of Move have marked August as a time of great possibility and great pain. In Canada, we recognize Prisoner Justice Day on August 10th as a time to remember all those who have died in custody in this country. We also acknowledge the sacrifices made by our forebears, those who have fought to end the inhumane, racist treatment accorded prisoners. George Jackson, one of America's prominent prisoner activists, was assassinated in St. Quentin in August 1971, and his name is joined by others, Jonathan Jackson, William Christmas, James McLean, W.L. Nolan, and others. In August 1978 in St. Quentin, activist Katari Golden died after being refused adequate health care for an injury suffered under mysterious circumstances. To honor his name and to fight for prison justice, a coalition of activists inside and outside the prison walls formed the Black August Organizing Committee. Starting in the concentration camps of California, Black August strikes swept through prisons across America. In this tradition, and together with those in prison south of the border, we, the prisoners of Burnside, continue this legacy. We are not violent. We are standing up for simple issues of human justice. We are organized together because conditions must change. Here's a brief summary of their demands: better health care, rehabilitation programs, exercise equipment, contact visits, personal clothing and shoes, same quality food as every other jail, air circulation, healthier canteen, no limits to visits, and access to library. And now, here's an interview with an outside organizer in Halifax. Thanks so much for talking to me. Would you like to tell me a bit about yourself and some of the prison stuff that you've been involved in?
Yes, so I've been collaborating with people in prison for a few years now. We have a radio show, Black Power Hours, that airs on CKDU 88.1 FM, and that's developed collaboratively with people in Burnside, which is a provincial jail. So they work on the content with us, and this is one reason why in this advocacy work and collective work that I was able to know about and then disseminate the news of the prison strikes.
That is super interesting. I was actually wondering how prisoners had heard about the strike, and I'd guess that it probably had something to do with relationships.
We've been covering some of the Black August stuff on our show, and then obviously we send in materials and stuff to people who want them, so they were aware of that happening, and then were simultaneously and separately developing their own demands because of what they're going through in that institution. So those two things kind of came together for them.
Can you tell me about the protest in Burnside? I'm curious about what it will end up looking like, how it came together, what are people demanding, things like that.
So they're obviously doing something that's quite a bit different than what's happening in the States. One thing being it's a provincial jail, so there's no such thing really as a work stoppage within the jail, but also just different tactics and strategies. So they have listed 10 demands, which they say, and I agree with, are comparatively modest. There's really nothing that hasn't been noticed or addressed by advocates. So their requests range from more rehabilitative programming and, better treatment for mental health, stuff like health care. So to have a standard of care, air circulation for fresh air, addressing the menus and getting healthier food on there in both the menus and in the canteen options. So it's very, very basic stuff. Exercise equipment, winter clothing. So if you look at the list, there's nothing shocking on there. Everything is basic. A lot of it's stuff that they're supposed to be receiving that is guaranteed. So they have listed 10 demands, and then they also basically just state that, they have a purpose, that they're in solidarity, and that this is a necessary move.
I appreciate how, even though, they say they're modest, that's still some pretty essential human stuff. Can you give me a bit of context for that and for prison resistance in general for Black or African prisoners in Nova Scotia? Like, what kind of conditions are people facing?
So this is not just Black prisoners, it is a collective of prisoners, but obviously a lot of prison activism has its roots in the liberatory work of Black prisoners, which is obviously Black August, which begins in San Quentin and in other jails with the uprising of Black prisoners in particular. But in Nova Scotia, Nova Scotia is the oldest historic Black communities in Canada, starting with Matthew DaCosta in 1603 landing. So the first Black person to land in North America was Matthew DaCosta. There's a number of settlements by liberated enslaved people that came here and started communities, and the Black communities here. So as long as being a long history of Black liberation, there's also a long history of Black enslavement. There was slavery in this province, and also, of course, escaped slaves establishing communities and then being taken back into enslavement as well, into indentured labor. And then, of course, long histories of segregation and oppression as a result. For example, Shelburne was burned down by the white settlers. They burned out the Black settlers at the same time. The destruction of Africville in the 60s. There's just a number of, obviously, issues that you can talk about. So there's a 400-year-old history of segregation and oppression in this province, and obviously that's reflected today in the prison industrial complex and mass incarceration for Black people. So it's frequently a myth in Canada that mass incarceration is only a U.S. phenomenon and that anti-Black racism largely exists in the United States. That is obviously not the case. In this province, Black people make up 2% of the population, yet comprise 16% of the youth prison and 14% of the adult provincial jails. I was also given a number by a parole officer that in the Atlantic region, Black people make up 1.4% of the population and over 11% of the federal population. So that's a 10 times over incarceration rate. So that is actually a worse percentage-wise than anything in the United States. So Black people are obviously severely over-incarcerated in this province. They also face all kinds of problems with justice, whether that's wrongful convictions. I've done work on a number of wrongful conviction cases, including a very, very recent one where somebody confessed to the crime on the stand, yet they still convicted the person with no evidence at all. Obviously, inside the jails and prisons, there's a huge difference in how Black people access things like the disciplinary system. There's currently a prisoner on a hunger strike in Spring Hill because he's been accused of being the leader of the Black group, whatever that means. And so they've segregated him for about 6 weeks now. So these are the kind of things that people are facing that specifically have a racial dimension, particularly like when Black people, if more than one Black person has a conversation or stands together, this automatically becomes gang activity, and there's surveillance in particular ways. They're accused of subversive activity or criminal activity. So there's a particular way in which Black people within the oppressive system also move. But this particular action is agreed upon across many of the day rooms, so it's certainly not only Black people, it's a collective action.
Actually, totally goes into my next question. I was going to ask you about how in their statement the prisoners stated that they were unified across the population. Can you talk a bit about organizing dynamics in the prison system? And I guess I'm also interested in specifically the jail system, where I'm guessing people are in and out more, and also connections with the outside.
Yeah, pretty much the goal of the jail system is to not allow people to organize. So that is obviously activity that they are always very much against. So whether that's dividing the populations in particular ways, so general population versus protected, and then the different divisions within the population. One of the major goals is to prevent any organizing. So it's certainly difficult to communicate with the outside and to communicate with themselves. But they have their means and ways, so they have obviously done that in particular, if you notice. So one of the questions I keep getting is, like, what are they doing? Like, are they striking? Are they... And I mean, a lot of their ask is for us to do solidarity actions. So, for example, to do this, to write about it, to publicize it, to take actions on the outside, whatever those may be, because, of course, they are much more vulnerable and face much more threats than we do. So it's very difficult for them to organize. And, of course, they face the threat of segregation, of transfer, of having their phone privilege cut off, of having numbers blocked. Those are all things that institutions can do very easily. So one reason why they wrote their letter and called upon people on the outside is that they're asking for people that aren't incarcerated to take action.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Definitely the consequences of organizing and the kinds of retaliation that people have faced are pretty drastic.
Yeah, so we know in the States, for example, they sandbagged like somebody's cell so they couldn't communicate. Right, so literally no sound could even escape from their cell in seg. So Of course, what they would suggest is that it's a security issue, but we know that just the very idea that people are organizing and are unified is a big threat to the jail. The Department of Justice did release a statement essentially refuting their claims, which is ridiculous because a lot of the things that are in their statement have already been agreed to by corrections in other contexts. So, for example, air circulation. There was a heat wave this summer, and one of the women called the radio and complained about it, and the head of one of the supervisors admitted, the provincial supervisor admitted that there was no circulation in the jail. So that has been publicly admitted in the media, yet when the prisoners put it into their statement, suddenly it's a point of contention. The Auditor General released a report a couple of months ago, and that report clearly indicted the mental health training and the programming available. And again, they admitted that they said that they accepted that report. Yet now when the prisoners are saying that there's no rehabilitation programs, there's not adequate rehabilitation programs, there's not adequate treatment for mental health, the Department of Justice is like refuting that. In Ramadan, there was a huge problem with them getting food. They don't have a halal menu. So these are all just facts, But so it's interesting that the Department of Justice has essentially refuted these claims when in other venues they have actually admitted them.
Are people hoping to spread their protest and also communicate with prisoners and other institutions?
Yeah, so I know that people are finding out about it. So, for example, I was talking to a prisoner in Spring Hill today, and he's on a hunger strike for a different reason, but had heard about this and so is aware that it's happening. So also sees his struggle is connected to that. As this news makes its way around, I'm sure that there may be people in other institutions that start to join. Depending on, obviously, news of the prison strike in general, like in the States, has been suppressed. So Burnside knows about it because we were able to tell them. But obviously, it's been enough of a struggle in the States. I think people in the prisons there know, never mind people in Canada. This isn't something that is necessarily covered in mainstream press. So it is obviously difficult for them to access that news. So I don't know if they're going to find out what's happening in Burnside and join in, but I hope that people do. And I hope they stay safe when they do so, of course. So I think that the burden is largely on those of us on the outside to carry that weight. The prisoners have essentially laid down the gauntlet in that sense. They've given us a statement, so they've let us know, and they just are not free to do the kind of solidarity actions we can do. So I think it's incumbent upon us to carry that torch for them.
In their statement, they also talked about how they recognize, or in Canada, we recognize Prisoner Justice Day on August 10th. Do you know if people were involved in observing Prisoner Justice Day in the jails, or how do they see that particular commemoration as connected?
Prisoner Justice Day is recognized in jails and prisons with people refusing to work and hunger striking. So that has been a tradition going back more than 30 years in Canada. So yes, they did do that on Prisoner Justice Day. So that is something that has been long-standing. This is a kind of building on that to both extend it to this international movement that's happening, as well as addressing some of the specific conditions in Burnside. And I suppose in that sense, perhaps taking on a slightly more political stance on this. I mean, I wouldn't say Prisoner Justice Day isn't political, but it's always been like a challenge on how we recognize it and what we do. So I think in that sense, this is prisoner generated. This isn't coming from the outside. This is coming from the people that are directly in the jail. These are their choices. Obviously, it's hard for them to speak to you, and both for safety reasons, but also just straight up communication reasons. They're not necessarily having the kind of access to the phones that we might wish. So this is one reason why I'm speaking to you, but that is done obviously in full communication with those people on the inside. And the reason why I'm able to speak to you is because over the years we have built that trust through this communication. So even me speaking to you is a sort of gesture of solidarity, but also we have to remember that the fact that, for example, you have to hear my voice and not theirs is because of the weight of this system, the repressive weight of this system, that both makes communication very, very difficult and also very risky.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other things that you wanted to mention about the protest?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think obviously the challenge whenever you're dealing with people who have been given the label criminal is that people believe that they are not deserving of rights or sympathy. So there's a lot of people who don't understand that the punishment is having your liberty taken from you, that is having your freedom, and it's nothing more. We do not put people in prison and then torture them or strip them of further rights. So one of the challenges in addressing these issues is that there's a layer of people who believe that you shouldn't have shoes or food or, a shower or anything when you go to jail because somehow they believe that, you are paying that price. And beyond the fact that Burnside, the majority of people in Burnside are on remand, so are actually technically innocent and have not been convicted of anything. Beyond that is just the fact that, committing crime does not strip you of particular human rights that are actually enshrined in our law, in the Corrections Act, and have been supported by the court. So I think in many ways it's been encouraging to see how much uptake there has been. And I've seen a lot of, obviously, sympathy and a lot of people agreeing with their demands, but also disappointingly, of course, you see a lot of people that seem to believe that if you're in prison, you don't deserve health care, or seem to think that things that are rehabilitative should not be offered. And, of course, just to get on a material, if I want to be capitalistic and material, it costs far more money to send people to jail than it does to provide people with prevention, with medical care, with mental health care, with addictions treatment, with low-cost housing. Those things are ultimately cheaper in the long run and do much of a better job in preventing crime and in rehabilitating and reintegrating people. So I hope that some of the conversation that's coming up around the prison strike can also be about changing the often very cruel and violent attitudes we have towards prisoners under the guise of being tough on crime, when in fact we know that those things do not work. So if you actually want to be tough on crime, you should be pushing for rehabilitation programs that prevent people from cycling back in. So I think that's the biggest challenge really is confronting the prison culture that we have and people's sort of settled view that this is what they deserve. So we have to continue fighting that attitude and fighting for the basic humanity and rights of people in jails and prisons.
Yep. Well, I appreciate the things that people do to fight that isolation, because I think that's one of the most important ways of, helping people maintain a sense of basic humanness or something in prison.
I hope that people don't just also sort of get interested today. The prison strike in the United States is scheduled until September 9th, so certainly at least till that point. People should continue to keep up the pressure, to keep sharing information. There's a lot of stuff available online. There's a lot of tweets. There's a lot of websites. It's going down. There's one of those sites, incarceratedworkers.org, Jailhouse Lawyers Speak. There's a number of sites that are tracking both the actions and the repression of those actions, so I really encourage people to keep track of this. We'll be covering some of the stuff on our radio show tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern on ckdu.ca. You can listen online, Black Power Hour. We'll be giving some updates on this province and giving the guys some of the updates that are going on in the state, so people can certainly tune in for that. I hope, this article and whatever articles else is done, but I just really encourage people to, not let this drop, to understand that these are ongoing rights violations, that people are talking about conditions that are long-standing, that advocates have been addressing for years, and part of this call, particularly on the part of the prisoners in Burnside, is that if there is no pressure from the outside, no one will ever respond to what prisoners need. It requires the rest of us to make it shameful and untenable and unelectable for these things to continue. So to do that, we have to show that we are paying attention.
We also have a prison radio show here in Kingston, so I'm hoping to also be able to maybe play this there and spread news of the protest that way.
I would say to everybody in Kingston listening, keep your heads up. Hopefully, they are able to also address whatever conditions they have. So much love sending in to them and to everybody listening in jails and prisons, wherever they are. One love, solidarity from Nova Scotia, and just support everything that they might do as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I hate your jail cells. I hate your bars. I hate your chains. I hate these laws. Women in the shadows, behind the shade. hate your jails. I hate your bars. I hate your chains. I hate these laws. Got my sister in the shadow. Sisters behind the shade. They can't see me. They can't hear me. Every day I call. Cleo was from Africville land. They tore it down, didn't have nowhere to stand. Met a white man in the city. He called her down like a slave. Now that white man's lying 6 feet down in the grave. She's in the shadow. Sister behind the shades. Okay, Mary. I hate your jails. Mary Watkins, I hate your bars. 2 million people in the United States. Look how far these shadows gone. Look at all the sisters in the shade. Can't they see? Can't you hear? Can't you hear? Can't you hear them call? Calling, calling, calling. Hear them call, hear them call. He called. Yeah, my sister's in the shadow. Sister behind shade.
And that was Sisters in the Shadow by Faith Nolan. You're listening to From Embers on CFRC 101.9 FM. You can also listen to the show as a podcast at fromembers.libsyn.com.
Hello, this is Gene. This is for the Prison Radio Show. I'm talking to Don, and this is August 10th, Prisoners' Justice Day. Now, it's a little late to air this. This will be airing next week or shortly after. But it's always good to talk about Prisoners' Justice Day at any time, because it's not so much the day, it's what it's for, and that's 365 days a year. So I'm going to introduce you to Don, and I'm going to ask him what he thinks of Prisoners' Justice Day now and before. We're going to start when he first went to prison. He's been in for over 40 years. He's done a lot of time, so he's seen the start of this, and he knows the history of it. So he can tell how he started doing time, how Prisoners' Justice Day was back then, how it's evolved, and what he thinks it is today, and does he see it moving in the future, anything good or bad, or is it progressing or degressing? Because there's an opinion on all that. Okay, here we go. Here's Don.
I first got involved in Prisoners' Justice Day in Spring Hill. Everybody knows it came out of Millhaven and Kingston area, and people down east didn't know a lot about it. Some information was provided, but it was more guys that got transferred into Dorchester that it came down to Spring Hill. So it was it was not a collective thing that everybody agreed with at first, especially down east, because an idea coming out of Ontario kind of got scoffed at automatically because everybody's territorial. But it caught on fairly quickly down east, and people did take part in it. Everybody, the only persons that were exempt from taking part in it was people, diabetics that needed to eat or something medical. But it was forced on some people too. People didn't agree that didn't want to make the sacrifice. Well, they made the sacrifice anyways. They had no choice. That was the way it was back then. Nowadays, it's especially here in Quebec, it's not widely.
Okay, Don. Let me. I sort of interrupt here, but I wanted to bring up that point there because that is true. It was forced on people before. Yeah. But the reason it was then, and I believed in it too back then, because when it first come, it was the administrations, really, the wardens and everybody were really against Prisoners' Justice Day, and they tried to shut us down and do it. So to show unity, we had to show 100% unity. We had to no work, no eating, doing absolute resistance, and the only way we could do that is if everybody did it. If everybody didn't buy into it. So there was people who were forced to do it, and that was part of the thing. I think it's evolved, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, it did evolve. It got to be where people were saying, "Well, fuck the man," that. Especially when they started coming around and laying charges on people for not working that day, And one year in down east in Dorchester, I was at the time. We went through the year before. They had charged a whole bunch of people for not working, and the kitchen started saving money. So the following year, we went through and take the trays and dump them in the garbage. Because, the warden was saying, well, we don't mind you not going and eating for that day. My budgets are blah, blah, blah. So we fixed that. And the next year, a bunch of us dumped it in the garbage. The following year, I was back in Spring Hill, and they tried to do something different. They tried to get the food that we weren't taking, donate it, and that the administration wouldn't do that. But that was when a lot of changes were coming in prison, and the prison populations were sticking together.
So for the idea behind Prison Justice Day was because of the people who died in segregation in the holes, and not just that, the mistreatment, like the psychological treatment. You have guys who were mentally having some mental problems, and they'd be put in a hole for a year, 2 years. So it's not just it's not just somebody dying there. It's all the misery and the crap that people go through in jail all their lives. So. Do you think that Prisoners' Justice Day has changed anything? Do you think that it was good to happen? I personally believe that it happened and it changed some things, but it's something that we have to keep battling on. What do you think on that?
Yeah, it changed a lot of things. One thing it did do, it got us to get together without violence. The shore guys were pushed into taking part, but after a while it got to be where, hey, we stood up to them without any violence. I was in many institutions in Ontario too, where that was the main theme. It wasn't so much, it was remembering the guys that we knew that died in prison, and there's so many of them, it's unbelievable. But it got to be where now we were fighting back. We were showing the warden, we were showing the public that, hey, fuck this, we had enough. So and that helped. That made changes, because a lot of time you know, the wardens would say, and I was committee chairman in some of these places, and, you know, the solidarity from Prisoners Justice Day was a good in our negotiations to better conditions in prison.
Okay, you know, like also, you know, I remember years ago, there used to be people on the street, the citizens would come, and there would be like 100, 200 and pickets in front of the pens. And I don't see that as much as I used to, but, you know, so it being a countrywide, Prisoners Justice Day is Canadian, but it's also in France, it's also in some parts of the United States. So, you know, it's recognized by international, so it's an international event. So, you know, it's obviously had publicity, but can you talk anything about the people who on the street who you know, ordinary citizens, activists, lawyers, social workers, the people who have supported the inmates inside, I think is one of the unsung heroes. Everybody talks about how the prisoners, yeah, you know, like we're the ones suffering inside and that. But, you know, I don't think none of this could have happened without outside people helping and pushing. And today they still do it. You know, they have their own families, their own jobs, and yet they take their time and they go out and they fight for us. So, you know, I think that was a big change, and I think that helped change a lot of things because of them. What do you think about that?
The people, the outside solidarity, that was so important, and it's still so important. You know, the people that march in Kingston on Prisoners Justice Day, there's many, many, many people that fast outside and go to rallies, and they're driving the change in the system. You know, without them, they would still be locking us up and forgetting about us. You know.
Okay, so, you know, I would like to know what you think, how it's changed. Like, what do you think it is compared to 20 years ago, like today? What's it like compared to 20 years ago? Like, it's obviously changed. And I found that it's become more of an individual choice, but still, we have to stay together, and we have to have solidarity together to fight these conditions because, you know, the prison conditions are never going to change unless we fight, and it's a never-ending battle because you cannot let your guard down for a second because they'll take it away. You give an inch, they'll take a mile. You know, so where do you think it is today? You know, like we know what it was before now. So where do you think it is today? And what do you see in the future? Do you see the Prisoners Justice Day having any effect on our lives inside? I mean, we got to keep fighting, that's for sure.
Sadly, right now, Prisoners Justice Day inside is at a low point. You know, in Quebec here, a lot of institutions don't have any organized Prisoners Justice Day activities. Individuals fast and don't go to work, but for the most part, you know, I can't speak for the higher levels of security. I can speak for the lower levels of security, and you know, we need to educate more of what the reason for Prisoners Justice Day is. You know, the newer guys, it's a different society now from when it started. It's a much more me society now. And that's reflective in the prison populations where guys don't want to make sacrifices.
You know, I think you're 100% correct in that. I think it's we have to inform the people more. Like everybody hears it, and they keep hearing, well, Prisoners Justice Day is because of people dying in the hole in 1972 or 5, but it's more than that. You know, we have to get people to relate to the problems that every prisoner faces, because at the end of the day, I don't care what institution you're in, medium, minimum, maximum, when they lock you in that cell at night, you're alone with your thoughts. You have a family out there that you miss. You have things that went wrong in your day. You know, like nobody has a good day every day, and some days, you know, there's a lot of suicide in prison. There's a lot of mental problems, drug problems. You know, these are all things that inmates face and prisoners face, and so it's a never-ending battle. So I think if people understand that it's for those things too, you know, it's not For sure, we're talking about things in the past, because if you don't have a past, you don't know the future. You can't prepare. You got to remember the past to battle the future. If you don't, then what? So now you have to understand what the things are that make every prisoner has in common. And those are the things like that. Everybody has a family missing. Everybody has pain of some type or another. If you can relate to your pain and say the other guy in the cell next to you, he's going to have that same pain, maybe you can start fighting and changing some of these things. Because, if together we are stronger, and if we're just in pieces, we're not going to be strong.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about that. Don't forget, people are still dying in prison. The numbers are consistent. Suicides, murder by other inmates, but mostly it's suicide. Or, in the last little while, it's caught on now more. People are dying from medical reasons. The medical treatment in prison is terrible. There's guys that discover after they get out that they have cancers that when they went to the health clinics there, they were saying, oh, it's nothing, you pulled something, or, and the other problem is in Canadian prisons, they have this thing about now letting you age so long in prison that you're getting out, 65, 70 years old guys are getting out of prison. They're keeping people too long in prison, and that's, that's the guys that don't give up and commit suicide. You're coming out of prison as an old man in a society that the prison system has not done anything to prepare you for.
So we have all these problems, and our vehicle to get the word out to a large extent, is events like Prisoners' Justice Day, because that's an international day, and that's an event that people know. So I'm saying we need to work on this Prisoners' Justice Day more. I think we have to make it more inclusive for today's people, because a lot of young people, like you say, they don't understand, they don't remember what happened. They don't care. It's me generation. And it's like I had said earlier, maybe not on this, but it's like the Veterans Day. You see them selling poppies. And when I was a kid, my dad come back from the war, it was a big thing. People knew what the war was because they lived it. They lived the hell of it, and it shocked them, and they really took it seriously. But nowadays, people who haven't lived in wars, they don't understand. They don't see that. They're more worried about their iPhones, or they're more worried about this or that. So we have to bring that, get that out, and get that more into the open here. How would so Prisoners' Justice Day is a vehicle for doing that there, but there's other days too. So how will you see we can use Prisoners' Justice Day in the future to get rid of these prisons? Well, I don't know, we're going to have to start. Like, prison abolition is a thing I believe in, but that's a hard road to hoe. You're going to have to work hard at that. But along the way, we got to get little victories. We got to fight all the time. So how do you see Prisoners' Justice Day in the future as a vehicle we can use to get rid of some of these insane laws we have, and to make prisons a better place, and not keep people in jail, like you said, until they're 80 years old?
Well, there's only one way. I used to believe that might was right in prison, because I saw all the changes that came in prison came through violence at one point. All the rights we had, the government got afraid and gave us them because we forced them to. But nowadays that method doesn't work. Education, that's the key. People that know the situation have to educate. Inmates have to educate other inmates. The system's not going to do it. I'm responsible for telling other people what it's like, what being in prison was like, what we can do to change it. But educating each other is the only way. That's, inclusion works, exclusion doesn't work.
I couldn't agree more, Don. There's nothing more I can say. You were very gracious guest, and you were very articulate, and you made some very good points. And if people go by that, we're going to be a step ahead right there. Okay, thank you very much. This is Prison Radio Show. This is Gene from Prison Radio Show, and we'll see you later.
When she can't get no letter, she can't hear from her home. It make a long time woman feel bad. Feel bad. Well, surely my mother's gone now. Mother's gone. Mother's gone. Surely my mother's gone now. My mother's gone. And these years on this chain gang left me alone. Left me alone. Yeah, these years on this chain gang left me alone. Well, my sister, she's gone too. Yeah, she's gone. Yeah, my sister, she's gone too. She's gone. Well, my sister, she's gone. And I feel so alone now. It make a long time woman feel bad. I feel bad. I feel bad. I feel bad. It make a long time woman feel bad.
And that was Long Time Woman, also sung by Faith Nolan. Thanks for listening to From Embers. As always, you can email us at fromembers@riseup.net. I'll leave you with a solidarity statement from a prisoner for everyone in Burnside Jail. Until next time.
Hello, I'm a inmate serving life in a Canadian penitentiary. We heard about your strike, and we wish you well, and you have all our support and our hopes and our prayers, and we hope things improve for you. Good luck.
Join us for Kite Line, a weekly radio program on Channel Zero Network that focuses on issues in the prison system. With over 50 episodes already released, you can hear informative and riveting stories about the impact of prisons on people both inside and outside of the prison walls, and how they fight back.
Kite Line is intended as means of communication between people across prison walls. Our goal at Kite Line is to amplify the voices of those within the prison system while encouraging dialogue with those on the outside.
Hear us on the Channel Zero Network and visit our website for more information or previous episodes at kitelineradio.noblogs.org.